Hello, my name is Nasiful Huda. In this video, I will answer the three questions for the second macroeconomics video assignment. Question 1 says, what is the difference between a trade deficit and trade surplus? Does the United States economy operate at a trade deficit? A trade deficit occurs when a country imports goods of greater value than the goods it exports. In contrast, a trade surplus occurs when a country exports goods of greater value than the goods it imports. For example, consider the trade deficit of the USA with China. If the USA imports $500 billion worth of electronics, machinery, and textiles from China, but only exports $150 billion to China, it results in USA having a trade deficit of $350 billion with China. On the other hand, Germany demonstrates a trade surplus by exporting a significant amount of cars, electrical equipment, and pharmaceuticals. If Germany exports $300 billion to the USA, but imports only $140 billion, Germany has a trade surplus of $160 billion with the USA. The United States economy operates at a trade deficit. Since the late 1970s, the USA has been experiencing a trade deficit due to a significant imbalance between domestic savings and total investment in the economy. The low rate of domestic savings among households, firms, and the government relative to investment needs necessitates that the USA borrows from countries with higher savings. This borrowing helps sustain a higher economic growth than if the USA relied solely on domestic savings. Several factors contribute to the United States trade deficit, including high consumer demand for foreign products, such as cars and electronics, outsourcing production to countries with lower labor costs, and a strong US dollar, making foreign goods cheaper. Additionally, the US economy tends to focus more on technology, finance, and health services than manufacturing. Trade deficits are a polarizing topic in the USA. Some benefits of trade deficit includes access to cheaper foreign goods for consumers, the attraction of foreign investment to fund domestic projects and foster economic growth, and specialization in producing goods where the USA has a comparative advantage. However, the drawbacks include debt accumulation and job losses in industries facing tough competition from foreign producers. While a trade surplus may seem better than a trade deficit, it also has its own benefits and drawbacks. A trade surplus can lead to increased employment due to higher production of exports, lower government spending, and increased tax revenue for the government. However, a trade surplus could harm domestic industries as they may struggle to compete with cheaper foreign goods. Additionally, trade surpluses can create imbalances with other countries, potentially causing tensions that lead to tariffs or trade barriers. That concludes my answer to question number 1. Now we move on to question number 2. Describe pre-1930s conventional wisdom. How does this theory differ from Keynesian economics? Pre-1930s conventional wisdom had classical principles. Classical economists believed that external shocks, such as wars or natural disasters, caused recessions. They believed that economies should be self-regulating, returning to full employment in the long run. According to this perspective, unemployment would be corrected by the invisible hand, which refers to the unseen forces that govern a free market economy. Another prevalent belief at that time was the government intervention in the economy was generally seen as a negative. A key aspect of pre-1930s conventional wisdom was Say's law, which said that supply creates its own demand. In this view, producing goods and services generates income for workers and households. This additional income allows workers and households to purchase goods and services, creating demand. The Great Depression challenged the belief of pre-1930s conventional wisdom. Before the Great Depression, it was commonly believed that government action was unnecessary to prevent economic recessions. However, the severity of the Great Depression demonstrated the need for some level of government intervention to reduce unemployment. This is where Keynesian economics come into play. John Maynard Keynes, a British economist, published a book named The General Theory of Employment, Interest and Money in 1936, which proposed a new economic framework. Keynesian economics argues that the economy should not be entirely self-regulating, and that government policies, including monetary and fiscal measures, are essential for boosting a struggling economy. One of the fundamental beliefs of Keynesian economics is that aggregate demand significantly influences economic performance. When aggregate demand is low, it can lead to a recession. Additionally, Keynesian economics emphasizes short-term economic stability, whereas pre-1930s conventional wisdom focuses more on long-term growth. Another key difference between pre-1930s conventional wisdom and Keynesian economics is their views on price and wage flexibility. Classical economists believed prices and wages should be flexible, adjusting according to market conditions. In contrast, Keynesian argued for sticky prices and wages, suggesting that these wages may not adjust quickly enough to prevent recessions. To summarize my answer for the question number 2, pre-1930s conventional wisdom advocated a self-regulating economy with limited government intervention. In contrast, Keynesian economics supports the idea of a non-self-regulating economy that requires government intervention to address issues related to low aggregate demand and high unemployment. That concludes my answer to question number 2. Now I move on to question number 3. What is the difference between monetary and fiscal policy? Describe how these tools are used to improve the economy. Explain what is meant by the business cycle. What is the highest and lowest point on the business cycle? Describe the difference between recessions and expansions. A monetary policy managed by a central bank, like the U.S. Federal Reserve, controls the money supply and interest rates to influence the economy. In contrast, fiscal policy is managed by the government, which uses tax rates and public spending to affect economic performance. Monetary policy aims to improve the economy by lowering interest rates, making borrowing cheaper for both businesses and consumers. This encourages businesses to invest and motivates consumers to spend more. Additionally, increasing the money supply can enhance economic conditions by providing more money for spending and investment, leading to higher demand for goods and services and increased employment. Fiscal policy seeks to boost the economy through increased public spending on infrastructure projects, which creates jobs. Cutting taxes also helps stimulate the economy as consumers gain more disposable income. As a result, consumers are likely to spend more on goods and services, prompting businesses to invest in machinery and equipment to meet the growing demand. The business cycle demonstrates the natural fluctuations of an economy. The highest point of the business cycle is known as a peak, which occurs when economic activity reaches its maximum growth level in employment and consumer spending. This peak signifies the end of the expansion phase and the beginning of the contraction or recession phase. On the other hand, the lowest point of the business cycle is called a trough. This is when employment and consumer spending are at their lowest before the economy begins to recover and enter a new expansion phase. Over the years, periods of expansion and recession will occur in the economy. The expansion phase is characterized with higher consumer spending, like more job creation and increased wages. The recession period shows the opposite trend, with lower consumer spending, reduced job creation, and declining wages. That concludes my answer to question number 3. This video explained several important concepts like the trade deficit, trade surplus, pre-1930s conventional wisdom, Keynesian economics, monetary policy, fiscal policy, and the business cycle. I hope you enjoyed this video presentation. Goodbye.